من العمرة أمس، فاتصل بي هاتفيا قال: لقيت الأخ فلان في المسجد النبوي له 15 عاما لا يترك صلاة في المسجد النبوي، رأى رؤيا أن النبي دخل عليهم فسأل عن حاتم أبو إسماعيل. أقسم لكم بالله هذا حدث، فسأل عن حاتم أبو إسماعيل وقال: أبلغوه أن الله راض عنه. من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه، فمنهم من قضى نحبه أبوه، رجلا زاد عن الحق دوما ودافع عن الحق دوما ووقف ضد الباطل، ومنهم من ينتظر حازم صلاح أبو إسماعيل وما بدلوا تبديلا.
أن يتوحدوا مع بعضهم بعض ضد الكيان الصهيوني، ضد المخططات الاستعمارية الصهيونية الأمريكية التي هدفها إسقاط كل الأنظمة الوطنية المعارضة لوجود الكيان الصهيوني على التراب الفلسطيني، من أجل وضع أنظمة حليفة ومتآمرة مع الكيان الصهيوني إلى الأبد ومع أمريكا. وجه رسالة للشعب التونسي: دعم المقاومة، دعم المقاومة، دعم المقاومة الشعب الفلسطيني إلى الأبد حتى تحرير كل الشعوب العربية من الإمبريالية والصهيونية والرجعية العربية.
There is no man feared more by international Jewry than Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. And while the Zionist West and its lackeys at the Saudi-led Gulf Cooperation Council would have us believe that armed jihadists in Syria who are murdering innocent native civilians are lovers of democracy, Putin remains unshaken in his defense of international law. Last November, Putin sent a signal to the Zionist lapdogs by dispatching the Russian patriarch on a religious mission to Syria, where he met with both the Syrian Antiochian patriarch and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The message was clear. Putin, who recently announced that in the tradition of the Tsars, his foreign policy will include protecting Orthodox Christians abroad, left no doubt that any attempt to oust Assad, who is protecting all minorities in Syria, will be opposed. Putin outlined his anti-Zionist stand last week when he assembled both Orthodox Christian and moderate Islamic clergy for a clear and certain news release that he will not countenance any foreign military intervention in Syria.
At a meeting with the religious leaders, Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin spoke against any foreign interference with Syria. We certainly condemn all violence wherever it comes from. You should let people determine their destiny themselves.
Now, with 3 Russian warships recently docked in Syria's port of Tartus, Putin's actions speak louder than his words. And I am certain that Talmudic Jew Senator Joseph Lieberman, who was the first senator to call for a no-fly zone over Syria and for arming the Syrian opposition, which in reality is made up of Islamic fundamentalists and foreign mercenaries, has gotten Putin's message.
He's going to run the risk of having the world community come in and impose a no-fly zone, and in doing so, we're being consistent with our American values.
Oh, for sure, Lieberman. Your American values have already underpinned the massacre of scores of Libyan civilians and the decimation of a once orderly and contented Libyan civilian infrastructure. And now you want to do the same in Syria as well. Now, why is international Jewry and its shill, the United States of Israel, pursuing its habitual violent program of regime change, this time in Syria, in order to install a pro-Zionist government, I mean dictatorship, in Damascus? Because Bashar al-Assad has intensified Syria's policy of resisting Zionist imperialism ever since taking over the reins from his father, Hafez al-Assad, in 2000. That's why. Since then, Assad has grown the economy at a healthy rate of 5% a year. Since then, Syria is debt-free and will not allow any Rothschild Jewish banks. And you'll be hard-pressed to find any McDonald's or Pizza Huts in Syria. It's forbidden territory for internationalist, Zionist-funded corporations. And since then, due to Assad's independent, self-directed economic development, a program shared by all U.S. regime change targets, the Jewish globalist bankers and their corporate pawns are being thwarted from privatizing and politically Judaizing the industries and government of the sovereign nation of Syria. The Jewish-influenced U.S. State Department put forward this very same Jewish bankers' agenda when it stated last month that Syria refuses to join an increasingly interconnected global economy. The Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, of course a Jew, Jeffrey Feltman, highlighted Jewish finance capital's plan for democracy in Syria. Read the humanitarian bombing of Syrian civilians in his recent testimony before the Zionist-led Senate Committee on Foreign Relations.
Bashar al-Assad is destroying Syria and destabilizing the region. An orderly democratic transition that removes Assad from power and restores stability is clearly in the United States' interest. It will support our goals of promoting democracy and human rights.
It's the same old lie. The Zionist West is framing the conflict in Syria as one between the lovers of democracy, led by the Free Syrian Army, and a murderous tyrant. So very, very far from the facts on the ground, as Russia and the Syrian government have been contesting all along. This has been verified by the Observer mission recently sent to Syria by the Arab League, which stated in paragraph 75 of its suppressed report, and I quote, "There have been incidents that include the bombing of buildings, trains carrying fuel, vehicles carrying diesel oil, and explosions targeting the police, members of the media, and fuel pipelines. Some of those attacks have been carried out by the Free Syrian Army, and some by other armed opposition groups." Unquote. My friends, this is hard evidence from investigators on the ground who are witnessing against the allegations of their own Zionist puppet masters of the Arab League. Lieberman, you have been shown to be a liar. Your name should be pronounced Lieberman. Bottom line, while the Zionists plan for a greater Israel, extending from Tel Aviv to Tehran, from the Nile to the Euphrates, by fragmenting Israel's bordering nations into competing militias and warlords, Vladimir Putin remains firm and uncompromising. You can hear it all the way from Moscow to Tel Aviv, a clear and resounding "yet" flaming forth from the righteous lips of Vladimir Putin, the world's foremost and only defender against Zionism's warmongering, world-destroying, ugly designs.
There is a real and growing concern about a possible revolt in Saudi Arabia. And that, folks, could be a game changer. The longtime U.S. ally is responsible for over 11% of the world's oil production and a big protector of Western interests in the Middle East. Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer with this rather scary warning about the potential fallout of a major uprising there.
The big one is March 11th. There's a Facebook call in Saudi Arabia for a day of rage all over Saudi Arabia on March 11th. Now, the Saudis have really good intelligence. They are tough, they're ruthless, and they're effective. There isn't a lot of anti-government activity in Saudi Arabia. If, however, for example, in the eastern provinces, which are Shiite, you get major eruptions on March 11th, all hell is breaking loose.
Joining me now, John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador, thanks for being here. That's a scary warning, and he's talking about a date that is right around the corner, March 11th. What do you make of it?
Well, I think there's reason to be concerned, particularly because of the demonstrations going on in Bahrain, an island just off the Saudi coast, where you have a population that's 70% Shiite protesting against the rulers, the monarchy that's Sunni. And there's a lot of concern that Iran is trying to manipulate this discontent, and that if they were able to overthrow the monarchy in Bahrain, that could have spillover effect into Saudi Arabia. So I think that's the principal point of concern, and I think it's something we should be legitimately worried about.
You know, originally this started in Tunisia, it spread to Egypt, and there was an assumption, I think, that this was going to happen sort of in the poorer countries, and that we didn't necessarily have to worry about these spreading to areas where living standards weren't quite as much of an issue. That has proved to be wrong-headed.
Well, I don't think fundamentally economics really lies at the bottom of it. I don't believe in this primitive economic determinism of the Marxists. I think actually there are a variety of factors, and I think Saudi Arabia, Bahrain at the moment, really very different from Egypt and Tunisia, and certainly very different from Libya. So that while the unrest may have been promoted by social networking and quick communications, the underlying causes are different. And the consequences could be very different as well.
You know, as we look forward to this, look ahead, I should say, to this March 11th date in Saudi Arabia, and Americans get a little nervous, when you see uprisings there in that country. We have to worry because they are such an important U.S. ally. And the question is, if we happen to see in Saudi Arabia something akin to what we saw in Egypt, what would it mean for us? I want to play a quick soundbite from Krauthammer on that and get you to react.
Because Saudi Arabia is the prize, it's the treasure. I mean, it's the gold at the end of the rainbow. It's everything for the world economy. And then you have to think of Western intervention if something like that happens.
Western intervention?
Well, I think we've been concerned about the stability of oil flows out of the Persian Gulf for the last 20 years, and for good reason, because in this case it's not just the Saudis. The Emirates in Kuwait, in Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates, also major oil producers would be jeopardized if Saudi were endangered by the Iranians. So I think as a point of concern for the U.S. economy, what bothers people on a day-to-day basis, you think gas prices are high now, wait until further instability spreads into Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and the others, if in fact that happens. So even though Egypt, a huge country, 85 million people, was in the headlines for the past month, Saudi Arabia and the other oil-producing countries are far more important to the United States on a daily basis than the others.